Greek world of its greatest evils, to confront its most savage beasts, forces of nature, evil tyrants, and monsters. No man could be expected to survive even one of these challenges. But Hercules must overcome 12.
These labors serve a function. Their primary function is to remove the pollution from having killed his family.
He will need to purify himself, to purify his hands, to purify his soul later on of the grievous crime he has committed.
It seems a little unfair to us because the acts that he's doing penance for weren't really his fault. He was under the influence of the madness sent to him by his stepmother, Hera. In the Greek mind, it didn't really matter that it wasn't his fault. He still needed to perform these acts to wash away the stain of these violent acts that he committed.
The quest for redemption begins with the first labor, to kill a savage beast that symbolizes mankind's animal instincts, the lion of Nemea.
The problem for Hercules is even though he's a magnificent archer, the lion's skin is impervious to his arrows. So it's only through brute strength that he manages to overcome the lion. And when he does, he skins the lion and he adopts it as his own armor that he begins wearing. So from then on, Hercules is always depicted wearing the lion skin, which protects him from harm.
King Eurystheus is stunned. He thought Hercules' first labor would be his last. Now he lays out a series of even more monstrous challenges, sure to put an end to the hero. A theme becomes evident in these early labors. It's man versus nature.
The ancient Greeks viewed nature as a scary place. They wanted to live in harmony with it. But nature was a bitch that if you didn't watch would kill you. And that was their view. They did not have a romantic view of nature.
There are a few great heroes, Hercules is prominent among them, who can tame nature, who can actually bring it under control. And this is the mark of a truly great hero, to bring this unstoppable force to heed.
The second labor challenges Hercules to kill another monstrous freak of nature. The dreaded nine-headed Hydra, a poison-spitting serpent that devours men in one bite. Hercules draws his sword and attacks. He slices through one of the Hydra's necks. Then another, decapitating the monster one head at a time. But as soon as each head is cut off, two more grow in its place. This represents the human lust for pleasure, which the Greeks believed to be unkillable.
The more you attack it, the more you cut its heads off, the more heads you have to deal with.
Hercules needs a new strategy. Against this enemy, his success hinges on more than muscle. Hercules grabs a torch and scorches the skin of the beast.
He comes up with the idea of burning off the stumps to cauterize the neck so that a head can't grow back in there.
With a final thrust, Hercules severs the last head from the body. It is a stunning triumph of man over monster.
So after he's slain the Hydra, Hercules dips his arrows into the blood of the Hydra, and from then on he has poison arrows. Our word toxic, meaning poisonous, comes from the Greek word toxon, which is a bow that you fire arrows with. And so toxikos in Greek simply means relating to the bow. So it's a strange word in English because it preserves the legend of Hercules inside the word.
Two labors conquered. Like a fighter in training, Hercules is honing the skills necessary to survive in a hostile world. physical strength, mental toughness, and relentless endurance.
In these labors, Hercules is overcoming evil, and he comes as an avenger and a bringer of justice.
In his next two labors, Hercules conquers another pair of nature's most formidable beasts, the golden stag of Artemis, an animal so fast it could outrun an arrow in flight, and a vicious man-eating boar, a monster Hercules manages to capture alive.
Eurystheus, who set him these tasks, never expected any of them to be accomplished. So we start to see Hercules as the prototypical superhuman. He seems unstoppable at this point.
To break the hero's momentum, King Eurystheus tries changing tactics. He introduces a different kind of natural obstacle: raw sewage. For his fifth labor, Hercules must take on a dirty job that symbolizes the foul side of human nature. He must clean out a massive complex of manure-filled stables.
Now this labor is different from the others because it involves menial labor in a way that Hercules hadn't really submitted to before. In the earlier labors, he has to slay beasts that are ravaging the countryside, and he's trying to protect human beings or to promote civilization. But in this one, it's simply a matter of cleaning dung out of a stable that hasn't been cleaned in many years. And he has one day to accomplish the task.
Hercules notices that these repulsive stables lie between two powerful rivers, and he gets an idea.
What he does is, using his great strength, he diverts two different rivers and have them flood into the stables and flush everything out.
One labor at a time, Hercules is making amends for killing his family. So far, he has proven himself greater than any obstacle that Hera and her puppet king, Eurystheus, have dreamed up. And with each struggle, he is only getting stronger. To the ancient Greeks, his success in the face of such overwhelming odds was an inspiring story. But could it have been more than just a story? Intriguing historical clues suggest Hercules was not a myth, but a real hero. Hercules is mythology's ultimate superhero. The combination of strength and suffering in the same character made him relatable to the people of the ancient world. They saw in Hercules a hero to be both pitied and admired, someone whose tragic story was connected to their own reality.
Myths reflect historical events that have long since been passed. So they are a kind of code and an ancient history that gets passed down from generation to generation. The stories of Hercules come together from people getting together in different cultures and sharing their own tales of local heroes that they know who overcome great difficulties. And as they share these stories, they start to realize, wait a minute, our strongman seems to be a little bit like your strongman. And then the traditions all weave together.
In ancient Greece, Hercules was the model for the ideal man. But did he actually exist?
It might be possible that behind each of these great Greek heroes there is some single historical figure, but history has frustrated all of our attempts to find and locate the actual persons.
Some versions of the Hercules myth say his family came from a Greek settlement called Tiryns. And ancient sources suggest it was once home to a real warrior who was renowned for his great strength and even thought to have a direct connection to the gods. This warrior, whose name is lost to history, served the ruler of a powerful kingdom called Mycenae. In the myth, Hercules also serves the king of Mycenae, his cousin Eurystheus, who assigns him the 12 labors. Is this coincidence or something more? Other clues about the man behind the myth can be found at one of Greece's most legendary sites. This is Olympia. In the year 776 BC, the first Olympic Games were held here.
There were hundreds of games around the Greek world, but the Olympics were the finest and the most prestigious. If you won at the Olympic Games, it was being elevated in a way amongst men, and it was as close as a mortal could get to the gods.
There are striking parallels between the challenges Hercules faced in his labors and those of the Games. Both were feats of strength and endurance that only the most disciplined athlete could achieve. But the connection between Hercules and the Olympics may run deeper.
Hercules reportedly founded the Olympic Games after one of his labors, so the labors are directly connected with the original foundation of the Games.
These are the remains of the stadium at Olympia. Its track measures 600 feet. According to the ancient Greeks, that's 600 of Hercules' own feet.
According to legend, Hercules himself paced out the stadion, which was 600 little steps, and it's 192.27 meters, so historians have deduced that Hercules' feet were actually 12.6 inches long.
That's a size 13 shoe. More traces of Hercules can also be seen in the main temple here. Reliefs salvaged from the exterior walls depict his 12 labors.
He was revered by all athletes, and one measured oneself up against Hercules. Well, it was very important to the Greeks never to surrender, so many athletes died rather than give up.
In the myth, it is this same perseverance that sustains Hercules.
Hercules' message is always one of keep going and you'll eventually succeed. No matter how tough things seem, success is possible.
In his sixth labor, Hercules must face a flock of ferocious man-eating birds who symbolize mankind's unreachable goals. He drives them off with his poisonous arrows and reaches an important milestone, the halfway mark in his 12 labors. But 6 more challenges still remain, and each one will only get tougher. His stepmother, Hera, will make sure of it.
As the labors go on, they become more and more extreme, and they make him go to further and further and more mystical places.
The next 3 labors will take Hercules beyond Greece for the first time and pit him against powerful foreign enemies. Stories like these resonated with the ancient Greeks in an age when they were anxious to expand their empire.
The Greeks, pressed by land hunger, are beginning to colonize as far out as the south of France, and they're sending colonies throughout the Mediterranean. And reports are coming back about various monsters or various things.
For his 7th labor, Hercules travels to the island nation of Crete to find and capture the prized bull of the king, Minos. The bull is a code for Crete's dominance over mainland Greece at the time when the myth was created.
In the late Bronze Age, Crete really was the most important power in that part of the Mediterranean. The places that in the classical period, like Athens and Sparta, which would have a lot of importance and would really become the most significant powers, really weren't anything very important at all. In fact,